Oh, it's a busy post-NASCAR Championship Monday. We have got IndyCar Silly season news, including a potential confirmation of a team merger, plus more stuff about Kyle Larson. Not only has Tony Stewart come out with an extremely hyperbolic statement, but we are going to talk about Kyle Larson potentially doing the Indianapolis 500 and exactly how he can do it. And I bet you thought that I forgot the intro. No, I didn't. It's a Kyle Larson video! But first, we need to talk a couple of notes on IndyCar Silly season. Now, this is a bit of old news, but it sounds like it's very likely that Kyle Kirkwood, instead of going to Arrow McLaren SP, will be headed to a third AJ Foyt racing car. That opens a lot of possibilities and a lot of question marks, especially about who may be sitting in the third Arrow McLaren SP seat, at least the Indianapolis 500, because we know they have intentions of running 3 cars there. That is potentially going to be one of the most coveted seats in IndyCar racing. And also, what a steal for Foyt to get one of the hottest prospects in American racing right now onto their team, if indeed this is true. Also, Carlin and Juncos, I mentioned this possibility, first reported by Marshall Pruitt in my Indianapolis 500 entry list video, and as you can see by this picture acquired by Billy McLeod from the Elite IndyCar Facebook group, Juncos and Carlin have likely merged, and the equipment that Carlin Racing owned has likely been acquired by Juncos Racing because, of course, their transporter, as you can clearly see, is at the Juncos Racing shop in downtown Speedway. We await confirmation on that. That means Juncos Hollinger Racing is likely 2 full-time cars for the entire year, and we'll have to wait and see who that second driver may end up being. I always appreciate your thoughts down in the comments of who you may think it will be. But first, or perhaps most importantly, I should say, Tony Stewart has come out with a statement saying that Kyle Larson is the greatest racing driver he has ever seen. And I want to talk about this because it addresses a point I made literally yesterday, is that the reason it is so important that Kyle Larson, from a racing standpoint, won the NASCAR championship yesterday is not just because he's a good NASCAR driver, but because he's a good all-around race car driver. And if you don't take my word for it and don't believe that he's the kind of driver who is cut from the same cloth of AJ and Mario and Dan Gurney, listen to Tony Stewart, because Tony Stewart, in a lot of people's minds, was last generation's version of AJ Foyt. And this is what he had to say on Twitter. "Congratulations to the best race car driver I have ever seen. Period. End of story." Wow. Okay. Because, and I replied to this tweet, and some article used it and said it was a negative. It was not a negative. But I replied to that tweet with a photo of shocked James Earl Jones. Imagine explaining that to your great-grandparents. But I responded saying, Tony Stewart saw AJ Foyt and Mario Andretti race. And he probably saw a whole lot more like famous race car drivers, or a lot of those drivers that we kind of put into that GOAT conversation. For him to come out and say that Kyle Larson is the greatest race car driver he's ever seen, that is a very, very bold statement. But one that, again, coming from this source, coming from Tony Stewart himself, and I'm aware that Tony Stewart is a Kyle Larson fanboy. I mentioned it in the video yesterday. He tried to get Kyle Larson signed to Stewart-Haas Racing for this year. Ford told him to go to hell, and Tony Stewart then went and bought all the Kyle Larson die-cast and then kind of subtweeted his driver when he made an ass out of himself at Bristol, and then eventually, of course, Charlotte as well, by placing a Kyle Larson die-cast on his hotel desk while watching the Cup Series races, which I thought was hilarious from Tony Stewart, but also, boy, he's got to be salty about this. So I think part of that Part of this statement definitely is the fact that he's salty at Ford and wants Ford to really understand what they have done wrong and why they need to go sit in the corner. Because in Tony Stewart's mind, you just let the greatest race car driver he's ever seen get away and become the driver that Rick Hendrick will get to benefit from for the rest of time. Wow, and I forgot to turn my damn webcam on. Well, here we are. Hi, welcome. This is me. This is my face. Subscribe if you haven't already. But because of Tony Stewart saying that Kyle Larson is the greatest race car driver of all time, something trended on Twitter last night that you probably shouldn't have trended during the NASCAR finale. But guess what? Everybody was talking about the Indy 500 last night. Guess why? If Kyle Larson truly is the GOAT, the unclaimed jewel of his crown in American motorsport is the Indianapolis 500. It was the dying wish of the great journalist Robin Miller to see Kyle Larson in a Team Penske car at the Indianapolis 500 next year. It remains to be seen if that will happen, but Kyle Larson did comment once again on the Indy 500 and his possibility of running it next year last night. This is what he had to say, courtesy of Jenna Fryer from the press conference last night. Larson said, "I'm open to anything. Logistically, it's just a tough thing to do. I would want to go there and know I've got a chance to win." Well, wouldn't we all? He also mentioned that he didn't know if Rick Hendrick would allow him or not. And he also said he's kind of tired of being asked about it all year. Well, perhaps you should just say you're doing it, Kyle, and then we will never have to ask you about whether you're doing it or not again. But logistically, that's the interesting point, because the Indianapolis 500, since the last time a driver attempted the double, has changed quite a bit. No longer are there only 33 cars showing up for the 33 starting spots, and there are no guaranteed spots. There's no charters, no nothing in the Indianapolis 500. So when we're talking about an entry potentially that could get as high as 40 cars, but will at least likely have 4 or 5 guys going home from that 33 car starting field, you have to qualify for the race. And that means that qualification, you can't just have somebody, well, I guess you could. You could have another driver qualify the car if you really wanted to start at the back of the field. But I don't think Kyle Larson would want to do that. And like he mentioned, he wants to have a chance to win. So starting at the back, while it isn't the gigantic penalty that it used to be back in the day, you look at Simon Pagenaud, who qualified way in the back last year, and really probably had the car to win, but because he started so far back, he only got to third place by the end of the race. So it can affect you starting in the back, even in the modern day where the cars are so close and hardly anyone ever goes a lap down. Kyle Larson to make the Indianapolis 500 is very simple. The All-Star race is scheduled for the weekend of qualifying, which is, obviously we know the logistical problems of the Coke 600 and the Indianapolis 500, but, Robbie Gordon, John Andretti, Tony Stewart, Kurt Busch have all managed to pull it off. So I have I have a lot of confidence that Kyle Larson would be able to pull that off. The qualifications, actually, it seems to work. Obviously, you qualify for 2 days at the Indianapolis 500, or at least there are qualifications for 2 days. The first day is essentially, in a lot of ways, it's what bump day used to be, although you lock in a bunch of spots. So essentially you lock in, the first 30 positions. So all Kyle Larson would have to do, really, starting between noon and 5:50 p.m. on the Saturday of the Indianapolis 500 time trials, would just have to set a 4-lap average fast enough to get into the top 30. Now, where things would get complicated would be if he qualified in the Fast 9, or if he qualified in the last chance qualifier row, which is the last 11th row, or below it, because then you have to come back Sunday if you want any chance of qualifying for the Indianapolis 500. And this is where the time crunch gets a little bit interesting. Sunday qualifying for both the last chance qualifier and the Fast 9 takes place between 1:50 and 3:45 local time, Indianapolis time, p.m. The All-Star race starts at 8 p.m. on Sunday. Now, if he's in the Fast 9, the Fast 9 is the late session of that day, which ends at 3:45 p.m. Now, that would still be possible for Kyle Larson to qualify into the Fast 9, make his qualification run for the Fast 9 shootout, and then jet to Charlotte. Here's the biggest complication, is that there is a practice session, a 2-hour practice session between 5 and 7 p.m. on that Sunday for the Indianapolis 500. Now, if Larson wanted all of the track time he could possibly need, and particularly so track time in race trim, that session would be very important. And if he were to run the entire thing, then you are on a time crunch and you would miss the All-Star race. Now, is the All-Star race mandatory? Maybe. I hear conflicting reports on whether it's mandatory or not to run. Certainly, this practice session would not be mandatory to run, and I would imagine that Kyle Larson would have all of the time in the world to test the car if he wanted to, especially if you're driving for Roger Penske. As we've seen, they can just turn on the video boards and run at night if they really want to. It's Roger's playground now. He makes the rules, and if you're driving for him, you can do that. So, yes, in a very long-winded way, Kyle Larson I don't want to say easily, because I'm not the one who has to plan or fund or do any of this, but I do believe that Kyle Larson, if he wants to do it, if Rick Hendrick wants him to do it, if Roger Penske wants him to do it, if NASCAR and IndyCar can work together and get this done, I think it has a very good possibility of happening. But if some of the participants aren't willing, then it all falls apart. So, what do you think of any and all of the things I talked about in this video today? Let me know down in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe. There's a whole lot more coming. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content, and I will see you in the next video.